also with us, as I said, Ashish Ray. He's been a broadcaster for years, based in London and with the BBC at times. How do you see, Mr. Ray, this playing out globally, especially in Britain where you are? The BBC's office is being raided. The IT department claims through sources that the BBC has committed violations which they are exploring.
I think it's a horrendous mistake on the part of the Modi government. Even if the documentary on Narendra Modi had done a certain amount of damage to Narendra Modi's already terrible reputation, I think this will get worse because the story would gradually have gone away. But now it's been revived, and international media worth its salt anywhere will now take a very wary look at India, and especially a government which is clearly determined to destroy democracy in India.
What role do you see actually the British government playing? Will the British government also take a dim view of this? Because so far the Sunak government has stayed away from this whole controversy, almost backed Prime Minister Modi.
Well, first of all, the BBC has nothing to do with the British government. It's an independent organization. It's funded by license payers in the United Kingdom, and therefore the British government does not have a say on this matter one way or the other. However, the British Foreign Office and the British Prime Minister's office would be extremely annoyed by the reaction of the Narendra Modi government to what was, in most people's view, a perfectly legitimate documentary on his role in the 2002 Gujarat riots.
Okay, let me go to an interview I did earlier, though, with Conservative MP for a moment, Bob Black. He's been critical of the BBC. Mr. Black, do you believe that the BBC is being unfairly targeted by the Indian government because it aired this documentary on the Gujarat violence a month ago?
No, I don't. I think the reality is that obviously there is concern from the Indian authorities. They must investigate appropriately. I've no evidence or understanding of what the allegations are, if there are any, or whether it's just part of an audit. The BBC, as an independent organisation, should be cooperating with the Indian tax authorities. I'm sure they are, and that all documentation will be provided and full cooperation from the employees. And then I hope the matter will be resolved very quickly.
How will this play out in your country, Mr. Blackman? Will the Rishi Sunak government speak up for the BBC at all?
The position is that the BBC is an independent organisation. They are not an arm of government. BBC obviously report through Ofcom, and then the Ofcom reports to the Culture Secretary. From our perspective, obviously, if there are concerns about what the BBC is doing internationally, we obviously have to look at that from the Foreign and Commonwealth Office perspective. But it is clear this is not an arm of government, and it's for the BBC as an independent organisation to operate fully and properly as we would expect. And therefore, it is not for the British government to comment one way or the other.
But do you see this as a freedom of press issue, Mr. Blackman, or do you believe the BBC must face the law in this country?
No, the fact is that when I talk about freedom of speech, I believe passionately that people should have the power and ability to speak freely, but also be challenged on what they have to say. And that's part of that challenge that is important. So the BBC has a vitally important role to play of challenging people, challenging politicians and others appropriately. But that is, it's not a one-way exercise, and it certainly shouldn't be. The BBC should not be used as a propaganda tool, either by the UK government or by other governments, or other people that wish to portray other governments unfairly. So from that perspective, this is not about so much free speech as being having a position whereby appropriate usage is made of proper journalism. Proper journalism investigates and has cost transparency into matters that need to be investigated, quite rightly, and that is a role for independent journalists, and that is a role that I think the BBC historically has carried out extremely well. It is obviously unfortunate in many respects that they've chosen to put this documentary on, which is full of aspersions, innuendos and smears against both the Indian government and the Indian judiciary system. And I think from that perspective they got it wrong. But it was produced by an independent organisation separate from the BBC, overseen from an editorship by the BBC, and then broadcast. And that's the problem, that they've caused themselves immense problems as a result.